accept all donations as well. But the question has to do with two things. One having to do with the medical marijuana and then recreational marijuana, where you stand on that. And then the problem that we're having on the Eastern Shore, having just been over there, you probably understand the immigrant problem, immigration, migrant workers being able to get the licenses and stuff to bring them in. So now the crabs are not being able to be picked, not able to, so it's a trickle down kind of thing. So how would you, as governor, if that happened on your watch, what would you do at the federal level?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. On the issue of immigration, there's a couple of things we need. One is absolutely, we need to make sure that we fight any attempt by the federal government to interrupt the ability for our economy to function. And that's fundamental. I mean, that is ultimately an attack on our economy by the president. Now, the other thing that we need to do on immigration is to resist the efforts of Jeff Sessions to have our county police and our sheriffs become deputies of ICE.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that Republicans are against that they used to be for. Nixon signed affirmative action into law. He signed the EPA into existence. Republicans are now trying to destroy both. So it is with this so-called, they label the sanctuary city movement. Where that's Police Chief Daryl Gates of Rodney King, like a broken digital clock was right. When he stood up to INS, who came to him and said, "We would like LAPD to become deputies of immigration." And he said, "Wow, I'm honored, but no."
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Because we have one job, to keep the public safe. And the moment that we become deputies, everybody becomes less safe because we have two jobs. But also because the immigrants stop talking to us. Not just the ones who don't have papers, like all of them. And also, because knowing that they're no longer talking to us, they will become more targeted by cartels and other criminal syndicates who will profit off of them and their silence, and we will all become less safe again. So thank you for that. And tonight in Maryland, somewhere in our county, all those things are happening. And Frederick County and so many other counties. And so as governor, I will make sure that we push Jeff Sessions out of our police departments and out of our sheriff departments. And we focus on doing what keeps all of us safe. You asked about immigration. There was an issue before that. What was the issue before?
Well, the medical marijuana and
yeah. So I'm 100% in support of legalizing cannabis for use by grown-ups. I didn't plan on that being a big plank in my campaign. I gotta say, I'm a father of a 12-year-old, a 5-year-old, and just generally, I don't have, say, a college student's perspective on cannabis. but this is what happened, Violence kept going up in Baltimore City. And on the second anniversary of the uprisings, around then, I asked a former member of BPD, who was a researcher for our campaign, to just go talk to the commanders that he knew across the city. And asked them, why is violence going up in the city? He came back, he said, there's two big data points. First one is, no one can exactly agree on why the violence has been surging in the last 2 years. Lots of different theories. But the other interesting thing is he said, if you ask them in the last 10 years, they were all in agreement that approximately half of the killings in Baltimore City in the last 10 years were one set of marijuana dealers killing another set. Now, I teach criminal justice policy, and it took me a second because I was like, you think of marijuana as kind of like a peaceful drug. But this is the thing. Violence in the trade has very little to do with the nature of the drug itself. It has everything to do with how hard that drug is to source. If a drug is difficult to source, the territory tends to be stable, and dealers sell it to each other like businessmen. This housing project generates this much cash in the heroin trade. If you want it, you will pay me that times 3. Now it's yours. in the marijuana trade. Turns out weed is actually a weed. You can grow it anywhere. You can source it everywhere. There's always a new set of marijuana dealers encroaching on the territory of some gang, of some cartel, of some other group of pot dealers. And because it's not regulated by law, it's regulated by laws. So the Baltimore Sun, when Heather Mazur talked about this a few years ago, said, well, let's see what happens in Colorado. Let's see what happens in Washington. What's happened? Violence has gone down. What has also happened? Violence has gone down on the border. Why is that important? Because here in Anne Arundel County, MS-13 is a real thing. And the violence goes down on the border because you're taking money out of the pockets of the cartels, who are now very involved in importing it into our country. So, if we can take money out of gangs and cartels' pockets, put it in the pockets of business people and farmers and our state treasury for something that's used by 75% of American adults, and the impact, the danger of it's not much greater than alcohol, I'm kind of all for it. What I'd say is this, though. Obviously, we have to make sure that we don't have a repeat of the exclusion of women and people of color from the licenses like we saw this last time. Two, we also have to make sure that we learn from what's happened, say, over the last 20 years or so with the regulation of alcohol, to make it as difficult as possible for young people to get. The sort of, if you think about, like, when I was young, it was pretty easy to get alcohol. But then MAD got mad. And laws change, and enforcement regimes change, and public education changed. And we're going to have to learn from all that and apply it to this. But yes, I support it with those caveats. Yep.
In the same vein, will you expunge criminal, like non-violent criminal offenses for marijuana and get those people out of prison?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things I'm most proud of is as president of the NAACP, I convinced Walmart to become the largest affirmative employer of formerly incarcerated people in the country. And I'll use my bully pulpit similarly, as governor. We will convene employers, because if you lock somebody out of employment, you lock them into crime, and that's not good for anybody.
Erase that record.
Yes.
No record.
Sir, Harry Freeman, I'm running for a state delegate for 31B, and there's a lot I want to discuss with you. But there are two times you mentioned shrinking the prison system to benefit other social departments to help boost the community. But in those in those prison systems, 95% of that population is bound to exit back into our community.
Yeah. 85 to 95.
Yeah, 85 to 95. You also mentioned Van Jones, who is the co-founder of Cut 50, and he has a national perspective to slice the prison population in half. Today, with the help of Jared Kushner, ironically, and the White House, they're taking the steps to vote on the First Step, which is a program to help newly released inmates and help them thrive in their communities. What would your plan be? Because I find this very important. For people being reintroduced to Maryland communities, education, housing, employment opportunities, because this affects everything across the board, from our economy to our workforce to educational investment in the community. So what's your take?
Sure. Well, thank you for that. And Van Jones is a dear old friend. We've organized together since I was 20 and he was 22. And we have a very similar approach. When I rolled out the NAACP's National Criminal Justice Strategy, my plan is on my website, and I've been told I'm not only the only candidate this time around, but the only candidate maybe ever who's ever put a comprehensive criminal justice reform plan out as a candidate for governor in Maryland. But when I rolled out the criminal justice reform plan for the NAACP, I rolled it out with every civil rights leader you might expect around me. And also Grover Norquist, the spokesperson for Newt Gingrich. He was on a plane that day. He had handwritten his letter of endorsement letter. And the head of the largest corrections officers union in the country. This one from California, the CCPOA. Their members have been working 20 hours mandatory overtime for multiple years, and their families were falling apart. And it was because we got that bipartisan support in the beginning that we were able to go into states like Georgia and Texas and be very successful. And I would take a similar approach here. There is, not every Republican, a kind of Trump-style Republican or Jeff Sessions-style Republican wants to go way backwards. And Hogan tends to align himself with them, talking about truth in sentencing and new mandatory minimums, all these failed strategies from the 80s.